Hey guys, John here with Growing with Gordon, and today's episode we're going to get into more detail on determining the value of a home after the work is done for a flip, or after small work is done for a rental property, or if you're purchasing your first house or second home or vacation home. I want to go into more details on the metrics that my team and I use to do what's called a property analysis. So what is a property analysis? Property analysis are kind of like the buy box, as some investors call it, or the metrics or criteria, or just the items used to look at a house in very specific ways, which all go into a formula, which then helps determine to the best of your ability what that after repair value range would be, because it really comes down to that number or range or potential on if you're going to purchase the house to begin with, or property. I can't say house because it could be land, it could be a condo, it could be a boat, could be a car, it could be really anything that you constitute as like, is this a smart purchase? Will it be worth it at the end of the end game, at the end of the project, the work? And there's a lot of, I'm going to be gearing more towards investor talk. I mean, obviously a boat or your personal home or a vacation home or a car, that's more emotional. That's more your personal interest on what you will get from that purchase. In more investor talk, it should be based on numbers and data versus emotion. You want to take out as much emotion as possible. Obviously, if it's your first flip, it's scary. And I want to go into more of the psychology behind buying your first flip, or kind of diving in head first on starting your own business. But that's a later conversation at another time. Right now, just property analysis. What does that mean? And what metrics do we use that might be different? So how do you analyze a property? Is it just specific parts of that property? Yes. And you also want to look at the neighborhood in general, the activity or the market specific, what's happening in the neighborhood, how many people are moving in, how many people are moving out, what the turnover rate is. You also want to look at the area as a whole, the region, the city, what development is happening, what's being built where the closest Chick-fil-A is, or Whole Foods, or Target. A lot of times these big development companies have already done a lot of this research for you. And I even had a conversation with another investor, heard it on a podcast too. Like, they base all of their upcoming areas on where Chick-fil-A's and Targets and Whole Foods are being built. Wherever there's a Whole Foods being built, then that's where they want to invest. I'm sure lots more reasons than just where it's being built, but there are, kind of where I'm going with this is, there are an infinite metrics or data points you can use on where you want to invest. So it just really comes down to the research that you do, the conversations and the networking, and where you're comfortable. Maybe you're going to flip your first property in the neighborhood where you live, so you can walk down the street and keep an eye on it. Or you have a popular area that you like to go to, or maybe it's where you're from. Like, there are a lot of ways, or maybe you just want to dive in head first. Our first flip was in an area called Manassas, Virginia, and it was one of the only times where I saw a property come up that was under $250,000. And again, the average price point in Northern Virginia, you're getting close to $600,000-$700,000. So it was very cheap, quote unquote, in what you could get. And the other unique part about this particular property was that it was around Christmas time. So it popped up a week before Christmas. And I remember sitting at my in-laws' dining table on Christmas Eve, writing out a contract, because, as I'll talk about this a little later on in the episode, one of the best times to go after deals or find deals or the winter season or slow season or holiday season, from beginning of November through the second week in January, because people are focused on families, they're focused on holidays, but still there are people with deals that pop up that need to sell for whatever reason. But I digress. So what are specific metrics or criteria that I look at with a house? Because, as I said earlier, the goal of this analysis is to determine what the after repair value is for the property. Because the intent of this conversation is to focus on flips, but you can also use it for rentals if you're doing forced appreciation, or your own personal home and you just are fine with putting in some sweat equity and increasing the value. So I'm going to say this multiple times through the episode, ARV, after repair value. Feel free to write that down. If you have questions, I'm all yours. So the easy metrics to look at are what are the number of bedrooms and bathrooms currently in the property versus what's selling in the neighborhood. So square footage is another important metric. What's the style of the property? Because you don't want to buy a condo, for example, and compare it to a single-family detached colonial that's 4 times the square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms. They're probably not going to sell for the same price once the work is done. So let's take a standard single-family detached home. Let's say it's currently on the market for $300,000. You want to find kind or comparable properties to that detached home. So square footage, above grade, below grade, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, style. And I keep saying style because, again, let's get even more granular with this. There are different styles of detached homes. You have ranchers, you have colonials, you have split levels, you have mid-century modern homes, you have Cape Cods, you have cottages, and the list goes on and on. So you can narrow down the search, and let's say you have a ranch rambler that's only 2 levels, and you shouldn't compare it to a colonial that may have 3 levels, basement, more bedrooms, more bathrooms, because the price points will be different. So what I'm going to try and convey in this episode is it's better to be conservative with specific metrics or data and using the most comparable properties you can. Again, it's harder if you live in West Virginia and the houses are miles apart. So you're just going to you can't focus in on the neighborhood. You may have to expand the diameter or the area that you're searching to find these kind properties. But for this conversation, I'm just focused on the neighborhood. And so you search within quarter mile. You go back in history in the last 3 months, 6 months, a year if need be, and understand that you don't have to be a realtor to understand this. You just have to know the market that you're doing the work in, because what happened during the spring of this year is different from the fall of the previous year. So I'm going to take a minute and explain that. What is the difference between the spring market and fall market? Why would the prices differentiate between selling a home in October versus selling a home in February or March? So it varies per sub-market wherever you're doing work. Every area in the country is different. And just for Northern Virginia, for example, the spring market, which everyone knows that term, and the spring market is where you have people coming out of the holidays and they're ready to find their next home. That is their goal for the year. Their New Year's resolution is to buy something, buy a house, buy a property, or sell and move to whatever the case may be. It's their time to act. So the spring market, to some, they think it starts in May or June. Realistically, as we've seen in the last 5 years, it's a little more in the more competitive areas. It starts the 2nd to 3rd week of January and continues through June, right when school ends and people go on holidays, vacations. So that's a large stretch of time where it's this quote-unquote spring market where you hypothetically can get the highest price for your home. Then the trends in Northern Virginia, what we see from June through August, it's summer. So people are still buying and selling, and tends to slow down slightly just because it's summer. People are going on vacations. They take a week to 2 weeks off. They may put the house hunt on hold until after the school year, and that's when the fall market starts. Then fall market goes until about the end of October, early November, because they want to get into a house before the holidays. Holidays come around, and then it starts again. So, as we discussed, the gold nugget, sometimes the best times to find a deal is during the slower terms, from the end of October through the second week of January. But the other gold nugget is if you're flipping a house, sometimes the best times to go to the market are in the spring market. So let's say you're buying or you found a deal in August, September, know the numbers and understand like maybe it doesn't make sense to go to the market in December. Maybe it's smart to wait until mid-January, early February. So you will know your numbers, you'll know your analysis, and it's just something to consider because that decision may dictate a few $1,000s to 10, 20, 30,000. Just it really comes back to what you have set and what your goals are. So I digress. Those are more of the 30,000 foot metrics along with the style of home, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage. So what I want to do is dive deeper into what we look at as a team to find potential deals or other items that we look at that have hurt us in the past. So one of those, and that's when I said that, the first thing that came to mind was Possum Hollow. So this is a real life example. I won't give the number because we sold the home and someone's living there now. And this was in Delaplane. This project took 2 years and some change. And normal flips should take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Maybe if you're adding an addition, building a house, a year, but a year max. So this property, we were able to get it for a great price. It was on 25 acres in one of the most desirable Western Virginia areas outside of DC. On paper, it made sense, but there were a few items that we didn't really consider at the time because we were excited. It just sounded too good to be true. There were surrounding properties on the same amount of lands that were selling in the $1.5, $1.6, $1.7 million range. And here we are getting this property for $700,000. It's wild. So a couple of the metrics used square footage. We used acreage or lot size, which can be used for smaller lots as well. The style of the home, the surrounding, what was happening in the neighborhood, the convenience of the property. Yes, it was farther away from a grocery store, but you had vineyards, you had breweries, just the attraction of getting outside the city, but still being so close to the city at the same time. And then the property itself, the layout, where the kitchen would go, how we would take what was there and expand it. Did we need to add bathrooms or bedrooms? Technically, no. You don't want to add more work if it's not needed comparing to what other homes have sold for in the area. I believe it's 2. I may correct myself here shortly. The one metric that we just were able to handle, but for future deals or opportunities that we search for, we won't jump on, was the distance from where our home base or headquarters is to where the property was. Our office is in Fairfax, so from Fairfax to Delaplane, that's an hour and 15 minutes on the highway, no traffic. So there's always something going on 66. So just the time it took to get out there, to have our guys do the work and then come back, was just a really unknown metric that took longer. And so a lot of times when our contractors or if we subcontracted work out, they would see the zip code or they would see that it was in Delaplane or they would see the magnitude or size of the house, and then those quotes would increase drastically. Be like, oh, it's a huge house, let's just increase it. And so the time it took for people to get there plus the budget increased just because of the work. We couldn't compare it to homes of smaller size, so those areas were an issue. And then with other issues of just for it taking longer, the holding costs were probably one of the biggest gut punch or learning opportunity is a better way to say. Because if you hold on to a property for a year and a half longer than expected, then you have interest payments that you're making, utilities, taxes, like interest payments for investors. It's just, there was a lot of money that was just gone because of the amount of time it took to start this massive project from start to finish. So we did sell the property and came close to what we were expecting as an after repair value. And I'd advise when you're looking at properties, add on a few extra months to your timetable because things will come up. Unknowns will happen. We see unknowns every single day. And it's the beauty of this business is that it keeps you on your toes, keeps you on your feet. You're just constantly learning and educating and growing. going into specifics with aggressive ARV versus conservative ARV. What do I mean by aggressive ARV? So after repair value, you know you're going to flip the house. You have found similar homes that have been renovated. So you're not comparing it to a new construction. You're not comparing it to a home that's dated. You just have found other properties that are, let's say, an A plus or an A. Like there are a few different grading systems you can use. A plus meaning new construction, A meaning not like live in but flipped, A minus. You can get as detailed as you want. So there are times where, and I don't want to say it's a mistake to do this. I always tend to be conservative because you can do as much as you can. You can do as much analysis. You can do as much research, but you're trying to figure out what the value of the home will be 6 months from now. And it's really not up to you. It's up to the market to decide what that value is. So an aggressive approach is to find what other homes are either under contract or pending at that look to be fully renovated. You can do your best to call the agents to find out roughly what the home is selling for, and you can use those numbers. But I also like to use that data plus more conservative data points of what is a home that's been lived in, that's updated, not fully renovated, and compare those two values. And if it's within closer to the conservative sense of like, okay, if we purchase this house, we flip it, and we list it for what these updated, not fully renovated, updated homes are selling for, will the numbers still work in our favor? Whatever that metric is that you use. If it's 70% of the ARV and that's what you're going to offer, that's a very generic rule that a lot of investors use if you're back of the envelope. So what does that mean? If you can sell a house for $600,000, you take 70% of that $600,000, calculator math real quick, that means you're going to offer $420,000 to purchase that property. And then you have to figure out what your renovation budget will be, what your holding costs will be, if you're using, depending on what type of financing you're using, what the lending costs will be. Like there are a lot of costs that go into this property analysis, which honestly, that may be a whole separate conversation of what we use specifically. But let's say you're using cash. Another investor that we work closely with, his goal is to profit 10% of the ARV value. So let's say that same $600,000 house, that's what it sells for. What's 10% of $600,000? $60,000. So at the end of the day, he wants to net $60,000 if he uses cash to purchase, renovate, and sell and get a $600,000 house. So those are just two quick examples, which I'll go into in more detail, other costs to be aware of. So back to the ARV, that's why through past experiences, through mistakes that we've made, lessons that we've learned, we tend to be even more conservative with our after repair value because of the unknowns, of the unknown contingencies. Let's say an extreme example, not really that extreme because it's Northern Virginia is a very wet area. There are a lot of basements. So say you're halfway through a project, you just laid down your flooring, drywall was installed, all the electrical plumbing is in, and then you come in and this is a real life example. I got a text from my business partner saying, John, I need you to get over here to Tipton because there's 2 inches of water on the floor right now. And I'm like, huh. Then I think back and I'm like, okay, flooring just went down. Here's this, there's that. I was going through my brain of like what could happen. And there, after lots of digging, we found a 4-inch PVC pipe just pouring water into this one specific point of our foundation from another house. Don't ask why or how, but that was the case. So we were able to divert that water, and we were installing a French drain that day, plus installing a sump pump in the basement to help prevent water from coming in. And if water were to get into the building, it would then be diverted elsewhere. So that was an added $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 that we weren't expecting. Again, we did well on the house, and that's why it's always good to have a quote-unquote contingency for that unknown that you just can't predict, can't figure out. And the bigger the project, the bigger the unknown or contingency should be. So that's why when calculating that after repair value, you have that rehab cost, you have the contingency cost, you have all the costs associated. So that will help determine, this is the drum roll, what you purchase the property for, because that is really what dictates if it's going to be a successful project or not. When I mentioned earlier in this conversation, this isn't geared towards flipping. That's the main point and the metrics used for determining what makes a good flip and not a good flip. And if you're an investor looking to buy your first rental property, or you own multiple rentals and you want to increase or build out your portfolio, or you are looking to buy your first home, vacation home, obviously there's a little more emotion sprinkled into buying your house that you're going to be living in, because now you may want to have your personal touches added to that particular property or vacation home. But you can still use the same idea or metrics to determine, like, if you want to force appreciate a home, which means, let's say you're buying a rental property that needs work, or the intent is to buy it and hold on to it. So you buy that property, you update the kitchen, you update the bathrooms, you put in granite countertops or quartz countertops. That will then, hypothetically on paper, increase the potential renter value of people who will be interested in living in that home, renting out that home, versus if you buy it and it's a wreck, then if you put it on the rental market, people will probably treat it like a wreck. So it's the benefits to adding in funds, and it's a lot less funds going into a property, hypothetically, that you're going to hold on to versus sell. And there are points that I'll get into more detail on, but in general, it's what a lot of times people do is you're just updating that property, increasing the rental value, increasing the value as a whole. So there's a lot of these values that are going to come back to you in the long run. Equity in the property, increasing the rent, which means more cash flow into your pocket, and potentially finding a renter that treats the home better, which then in turn will be the best for you in the long run. When it comes to buying a property for yourself, you can look into these metrics of like, oh, maybe we're buying a house that has an unfinished basement. We can get it at this specific price point, but understand that here are these other homes with finished basements, and what value are they selling at? So then over time, when you finish that basement, along with Northern Virginia metrics of just standard appreciation of 6 to 8%, you can, in the back of your head, be like, okay, if I over time finish this basement, say I add a bathroom, add a bedroom, then now this $600,000 house could actually sell for $700,000. And if I'm going to live in it for X amount of time, then that's just that much more equity that's going into your quote-unquote pocket. So when you do sell that property, it's that kind of sweat equity that you've put into the home. So that's a smaller example. There are other ways that people do update their homes over time, the kitchens, the bathrooms, even new construction. Maybe you're not going to really update anything, but the value in the new construction will increase as more homes are constructed in that neighborhood and the surrounding neighborhoods. So as more homes are built and sold, then that's just a natural appreciation that you're going to get automatically, sometimes even before you get to move into your house. I've had multiple clients who buy new construction that hasn't even been built yet, hence new construction, and the time of when the house has been purchased, contract has been signed, to when 6, 7, 8 months to a year later when the house is finished, that's a year's worth of appreciation that they just automatically get because inventory in general in the United States is low. So the incentive is for builders to continue building. That value will continue to go up. So that is one of the secret benefits to buying a new construction home, with the warranty on top, with the construction warranty, a lot of ins and outs and secrets that you get in really any route or avenue for investing or purchasing your first house, or metrics that you can think of when you're doing this analysis. And so I hope this gave you an overview of different things to think about, plus real life examples of what my team and I have gone through. And there's still a lot that I can learn as well. So if there's anything that I missed, or any questions, or really anything that comes to mind, reach out and I'd love to talk more about it. have another conversation. I can have you on the show, and let's just grow together. So on that note, hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.